to hear our wonderful speaker, Kavan Stafford. He's from NHS Lanarkshire. Kavan is here to discuss how we can support vulnerable users in public libraries and our attitudes to homeless users, a topic which is hugely important for us all working closely with our communities. So what's this discussion about? Kavan will be looking at research revealing attitudes toward library users experiencing homelessness and how public libraries can play a pivotal role in supporting such vulnerable patrons. Kavan is the senior librarian for the evidence team at NHS Lanarkshire. However, he spent the previous 7 years working in public libraries, first in Easterhouse Library and then in Glasgow's Mitchell Library, where he spent 5 years as an information officer, helping to run leisure and lifestyle, the Mitchell's Lending Library. During the pandemic, he completed his MSc in Library and Information Management at the University of Ulster, for which his dissertation involved interviewing and surveying Mitchell Library staff about their attitudes to homeless library users. He explored this research further in articles for The Big Issue, who have kindly joined us today at the conference, and via your delegates Swag Bags and Bella Caledonian, as well as a lunchtime talk for CILIPS last April, which is still available on YouTube. Earlier this year, Kavan conducted a follow-up survey with the staff at the Mitchell Library. He is going to present his findings along with recommendations for other library staff working with vulnerable users. There'll be some time at the end of the session for questions. Now please, Kavan, take it away.
Hi everyone. I'm hoping there'll be some time for questions. I've taken my watch off so I can see the time. But when I've practiced this over the last week, the time has varied a little bit within a sort of 10-minute frame. So I'll do the best I can. So welcome to the CILIP conference talk, supporting vulnerable users in public libraries, attitudes to homeless users revisited. I'm really glad to be here today, and I'm really excited to see you all here to hear the talk. I'll be speaking for about 30 minutes today, hopefully. It should manage to leave 5 minutes or so for questions at the end, but if you want to ask me something after, you'll get the chance. I'll be around for the 2 days. So, a bit about me. My name's Kavan. That's my email there on the screen if you ever want to chat to me. Sorry, I've got colds. And as of the past 2 months or so, I've been your senior librarian at NHS Lanarkshire. However, I worked as an information officer in the Mitchell Library for about 5 years, and in the Mitchell Library generally for about 7 years prior to that. As has already been said, I did my degree in the University of Ulster, and part of my dissertation was based on working with Mitchell Library staff to kind of examine their attitudes towards homeless users and how good we were at providing the service for homeless users. So some of the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that, or have heard already, that I've already spoken about this topic before, and that's true. I gave a lunchtime talk for CILIPS last April, which was called Helping Homeless Users in Public Libraries, which you can still view on YouTube. That talk discussed my initial research as well as changes we made in the Mitchell following that research. You can still view it on YouTube. The talk today won't cover the same ground because it'd be boring for me otherwise, if not for you. But it will involve me discussing a lot of kind of similar research. I'm going to look at some of the things I talked about last year and kind of compare them to this year. And I'm going to posit that any of the changes in the survey that conducted earlier this year is going to be at least partly as a result of changes we made in Mitchell following that previous research, including online training, visits from homeless organisations, and a strong stance from management in support of homeless users. So we're going to have 5 parts of the talk. The top 3 are pretty short. We're going to look at some statistics of homelessness in Scotland and some background of the Mitchell Library just so you can get an idea of what we're looking at here. We're going to take a little bit of a look at some previous research on this subject to see how the library field as a whole is kind of looking at homeless users. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the survey. And then at the end I'll just say thank you, which will be nice. So before I start talking about the data I've collected, I want to be clear about how I'm defining the kind of keyword at the centre of this talk. Homelessness has quite a lot of definitions depending on who you're speaking to, depending on what organisation you're working with. I'm going to use the Scottish Government's definition of homelessness, not because it's perfect or anything like that, but because the statistics I'm going to be using are coming from the Scottish Government, so it makes sense to work under the same basis they're working. And they define it as follows on the screen. So a person is homeless if he, she or they have no accommodation in the UK or elsewhere. They're also homeless if they have accommodation they cannot reasonably occupy, for example because of a threat of violence, and potentially homeless if it's likely they'll become homeless within 2 months. And they're intentionally homeless if they deliberately did or failed to do anything which led to a loss of accommodation, for example not paying rent, say, deliberately rather than because they kind of ran out of money. I'm also going to use the word homeless throughout, so you may have seen discussion, you may not have seen discussion about it because I realise that not everyone reads as much about this as me, but you may have seen discussion about use of the term unhoused, for example. That's a fine term. I don't want to get bogged down in what term's the right term. I like homeless because you could be housed and still be homeless. For example, if you're couch surfing, staying at friends' houses, but you don't have a home, you are housed, but you're still homeless. I don't love unhoused, but that's what we're going to be using. So I want to begin by giving you some background about the problem of homelessness in Scotland, using the statistics most recently released. So these are from 2023. The Scottish Government releases these statistics between August and October, depending on the year. So we don't have the 2024 statistics yet. So those statistics will range from, they'll be taken from late 22 to kind of mid 23. And one of the things I'm going to do is also remark on the change in these statistics since last April, when I gave the similar talk for the CILIPS lunchtime. Now, in Scotland, late last year, there were 16,420 households assessed as homeless. So that could consist of an individual, of a couple of children, or any other combination thereof. This is a rise of about 1,000 year on year, a little bit more actually since my last talk. About 400 of those are actively sleeping rough. So about 16,000 of them, they don't have a home as such, but they're potentially in council temporary accommodation, for example, staying with friends, etc. But about 400 of them are actually sleeping rough outside. 44% are single males, 20% are single females, the rest are families. And the ratio of white to BAME is about 84% white to 16% BAME, which, if you know about the levels of black and minority ethnic individuals in Scotland, means that black and minority ethnic people are pretty heavily overrepresented in terms of homeless people, even though it doesn't seem like a lot when you look at the numbers. There are 30,724 open homeless cases in Scotland, which is up about 2,000 since the last time I gave the talk. These are ones that are being assessed in addition to the homeless individuals, and that's 16,000. So these are the open cases, people that have gone to the council and said, listen, I'm homeless, I need help, but they've not yet been assessed as homeless. There are 9,860 children in Scotland alone who are homeless, who don't have a home. That's about 700, a rise of about 700 from last year. So almost 10,000 children in the country don't have a home. And there are about 15,000 individual households in temporary accommodation. So this, as I said, this can be council accommodation, hotels, things like that. Not ideal places to, for example, raise a family, to work from, etc. So let's give you a view of the scenario we're working with in Scotland. 16,420 homeless people, about 400 sleeping rough, and most of them are based in the city centre, the ones sleeping rough particularly. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's to do with the location of shelters, it's to do with the location of access to food, it's to do with the fact that there were people there who needed to give them aid. And for most of the day, these people are outside quite cold country, without access to anywhere to be out of the weather or have something to do, except of course the library, which then becomes a kind of common destination for people, particularly those who are sleeping rough, because in a library they are ideally just another patron of the library, so it becomes an avenue for them to escape that stigmatised identity. When they're sitting on the street, they're a homeless person. When they're sitting in the library, they're a library user.
There.
So we next have some stats to work with. I want you to see what I was basing my research on in terms of the building, for those of you that don't know the Mitchell Library. So opened in its current position in 1911, it's been expanded twice, took its current form in the 80s, has about 3 million books, has computers, e-books, study spaces, group working areas, has a business and IP centre, loads of stuff going on, which means it has an incredibly diverse user group, which includes students, researchers, academics, the local community of Anderson, children, older people, and of course a significant amount of homeless people. And what that means is that there's naturally going to be clashes within those groups, not just with homeless people and other groups, but with all these groups, because they're all using this one space for so many different things, and that can be tricky to manage. There are 4 departments in the Metro. So leisure and lifestyle, which I've already mentioned, that's our lending department, the ground floor. That operates pretty much as a local library for Anderson. We've got general services, which is probably what you think of when you think of the Mitchell Library. It's like we stuff here, it's our non-fiction section, most of the books are referenced, where you can sit quietly and read, you know. We've got special collections, so that holds our family history centre and our Glasgow collections, and then we've also got a business and IP centre, so we've got a lot going on in it. Now, for the initial research I undertook to gauge the lay of the land at the Mitchell, I did a questionnaire, more about that and its results later, and then some follow-up interviews with 3 random staff members. My follow-up research, which has been discussed today, just involved a questionnaire. Most of the questions were the same, but you'll see in upcoming slides that there were a few which specifically asked questions about how things have changed since the last survey. Before I start there, because of staff makeup, I think it's quite important. This is the staff makeup of the Mitchell Library when I did the initial survey. It's changed a little bit since then, not a whole lot. We still have the same amount of library assistants, about 33. That varies depending on people working part-time, so on, but it's 33 full-time positions. 9 librarians and information officers, 3 information officers, and then 6 librarians. And then at the time we had 2 principal librarians. Now, I'm sure for a lot of you won't be surprised to hear that government cuts have swung, and we now have 1 principal librarian. She does a great job, but she does 2 people's job, which is difficult. Now, before I move on to discuss the results of the questionnaire, I want you to understand what we're working with regards to how homeless people are viewed by the library community internationally. So the research that I did with the Mitchell Library staff, I think quite neatly adds to research that's been done before. And you'll see that I like to divide things into sections, so I'm going to divide this into 3 very short sections. First, I'm going to look at how homeless users use libraries from the perspective of those working them, from our perspectives. Then I'm going to look at how homeless users say they're using libraries, which is often different. And then we're going to look at, just very briefly, a piece of research that was done in America, which is doing pretty much the same thing I'm doing here. So that was by a researcher called Geezer, and it was called A Place to Call Home. And that did exactly what I did. It asked public librarians in the southwest of America how they feel about homeless users using their library. There's no point in... Sorry, that's someone. Sorry. There we go. There's no point in beating about the bush. So if we start to look at how library professionals write about homeless users, how we think about them, it can be tricky, and those of us working in public libraries know how tricky it is to manage these things quite well. The fact is, we're all working with increasingly small budgets, increasingly small staff, and with increasingly diverse communities who have increasingly diverse needs. Hitting all those needs that we're expected to with this lower budget, with these fewer staff, is really, really tricky. And it's especially tricky when we're talking about the needs of a group like homeless users, who are both vulnerable and subject to a lot of discrimination from others. The literature on the subject recognises the fact that staff are often torn between multiple roles when serving homeless patrons, some of which are undeniably beyond the scope of our jobs, and I think that's absolutely true. And those of us who've been in the role for a long time, and those of you who have been in the role for longer than me, and seen the collapse of social security in our communities, may feel that library workers, they want to accommodate the homeless, but feel that the services for the homeless used to be someone else's job, and now it's kind of fallen to you, and that's difficult. What one researcher found, and I think this is something that may resonate with a lot of you, was that most librarians in the situation are sympathetic, but very frustrated by low budgets, lack of support, and lack of training. And I think that's something that we can all agree with. Now, of course, not all the opinions we come across are so reasonable. Homeless people face a lot of discrimination. This is completely undeniable. And that also spills over into our profession as well. I'm drawing attention to a couple of essays here. There are others like them, but these are, I think, these are kind of the worst of, let's be honest. So you've got this one by Bullard here, which has an awful title, Gypsies, Traps and Rage, and Cronin, What a Library Is Not, which I also think is kind of a horrible title, because I don't think we should be thinking of things that way. So Cronin's piece, the bottom one, that argues really bluntly that a library is not a refuge for the homeless. And he says that we're getting to the stage where a disruptive minority is effectively preventing the majority of bona fide library patrons from exercising their rights. Now, we don't have time here to examine what bona fide library patrons even are, and he certainly doesn't examine that in the essay. It's available online for free. It's really short, so you can have a look yourself, but he doesn't tell us what they are. And in the other essay, Bullard expressed concern. He says, this is in 2002, but he says that today's libraries have become a haven for the homeless, the young, the substance abuser, the sexual deviant, the elderly, the criminal-minded, and the mentally disturbed. So the equation of homeless users, not to mention young people and old people, with substance abusers and sexual deviants is unfortunate and suggests a real kind of contempt for that audience. I want to be pretty clear here that the idea that homeless users are a disruptive minority in libraries is a bit of a myth. I guarantee you that you are not aware of most of the homeless users who use your public library. You will be aware of some of them. I'm sure that those of you watching public libraries have some in your head right now. The majority of people who use your library who are homeless, you do not know who they are. It's a very stigmatised identity. Homeless users are adept at hiding the fact that they're homeless because they face discrimination for it. This is particularly the case for homeless women. Regardless, I think it's really important to note that whatever your reason for thinking so, categorising an entire class of people as problem patrons, which is often the case in library literature when talking about homeless people, is just outright discrimination. You can dress it up any way you like, you can say that discrimination is okay, but it's discrimination nonetheless. Now, looking at the way the homeless people use libraries, one notes that like other regular users, homeless patrons have general and specific needs when they visit libraries. Some of them are information related, some are not, just like the rest of us. And when their information needs are considered specifically, they're the same as everyone else's. In fact, the two most commonly reported needs by patrons, regardless of housing status in America, this was done by a researcher called Kavan, were employment and financial needs, closely followed by computer access and transportation. Everyone needs the same stuff. They're all using libraries in basically the same way. And the idea that homeless users' needs are the same as those of other users is reflected in other studies. Upon discovering, which to see that surprising a discovery, that internet access seemed to be very important to homeless users, a researcher called Kelleher suggested that homeless users seem to just enjoy the ease of accessing information and entertainment online, which I'm sure they do. We all do. Now, Muggleton did some really great research in this, if you want to look him up. He did some research in Glasgow talking to people who were in homeless shelters and how they use libraries. And he argues simply that contrary to the beliefs of Cronin, who we've already mentioned, homeless people use public libraries pretty much like everyone else does. And having said that, you may wonder why it's worth treating homeless users differently at all. Why am I talking about homeless users if they're all just the same as everyone else? And I think there's a couple of quite short answers to that. Homeless people should still be seen as a special user group in libraries, not because they're separate from other users or lesser or different exactly, but because their information needs are often underserved and their rights to that information are not clearly defined. Additionally, when the rights are removed from homeless users, they are often at a disadvantage when dealing with what tend to be quite opaque complaint systems in public libraries. We may not like to think it, but the fact is very likely many of us, including me, will react differently if the same complaint comes from a clearly homeless person in old clothes, smelling of drink, and when it comes from a well-spoken woman in a neat suit. And this idea of our perspective on homeless people brings me really neatly to the next stage of our discussion, which is looking at the only other piece of research like this one that I've done, which is the Geezer piece, The Place to Call Home. So what I found when talking to participants, which were library workers, that they overwhelmingly spoke of the importance of treating all patrons, homeless or otherwise, alike, but they noted how difficult that was to do on a daily basis when their needs are different. And what Geezer found is that overall homeless users tend to receive unequal treatment, and further noted that the approach of trying to serve all patrons entirely equally might ignore the specific needs and challenges that homeless patrons present. And this is something that we've come across when we're talking about disabled patrons, for example. Treating everyone exactly the same can disadvantage those who can't take advantage of what we're offering in the same way as others. And what it boils down to is that striking a balance between making the destitute homeless people feel welcome and the general public feel comfortable is tricky. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, in early 2022, I sent out that really detailed survey to all the staff, that is, all the people on this list. The survey has 17 questions. The first 3 were what could be described as housekeeping questions, so not overly interesting. Things about your job role, for example, which were more of interest to me than anyone else. Then questions 4 to 13 took the form of Likert scale close-ended questions. So that's rating statements on a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree, for example. And then questions 14 to 17 were open-ended questions to allow people to express themselves in their own words, which produced some really interesting results. All the questionnaires were completely anonymous and then were followed by interviews. The results for that story were really interesting. If you want to see a full discussion of them, take a look at that YouTube video from last year. And they led to a lot of discussion both internally in the Metro and then CILIPS, and also in articles I wrote as well. And then towards the end of 2023, I started to put in what had always been put in place, what had always been my long-term plan, to conduct a follow-up survey building on the results of the first. So I wanted to see if the changes we put in place at the Metro after that initial survey, and they were quite sweeping changes in a lot of areas, and you can take a look at the YouTube video towards the end of it, I talk about that. I want to see if those changes had led to any changes in the attitudes of staff towards homeless users. So the follow-up survey had 15 questions instead of 17. Most of them were the same, but there were a couple of new ones, including one which said, I think things have improved for homeless users of the Metro Library since the last time I completed a survey, and you to rate that from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And an open question, which asked people to describe any changes to the Metro Library service for homeless users since the previous survey. Now, this is going to be quite a truncated look at the statistics and answers. We don't have a lot of time left. I've got about 10 minutes on my watch to fit in the data and a useful discussion. So if I had to pick some of the more interesting close-ended questions, I know that seems like cherry picking, and it seems that way because it is cherry picking. I've just picked the most interesting ones. But if you want to see the rest of the data, just let me know. I can send you the anonymised data. You can have a look through it yourself. So let's make a start. What we're going to do with each of these is look at the answers from the initial survey and compare them with the new survey. So this is the 2022 results for one of the earlier questions, question 3. Which of the following best reflects your opinion of homeless individuals using the Metro Library? So you can see here that 4% felt negative, 36% felt positive, 24% very positive, and then 36% were kind of neutral. It's not terrible actually, it's not too bad. But if we look at the results from the second survey, you can see there's a big improvement in that. Now 85% of people either feel very positive or positive about homeless individuals using the Metro Library, and only 15% are neutral on it, and we've managed to eliminate negativity altogether, which I thought was great. So we have a 50% increase in positive responses altogether in that question. The next we're going to look at is another Likert question, and this one gauges staff awareness of the issue of how library policies may inadvertently disproportionately affect homeless users. The question is, I'm aware of Metro Library policies which may affect homeless users, and as you can see the results from 2022, we're about half of the people being somewhat aware of some that may affect them, and then about 40% being aware of some, and then about 8% saying no, they're not aware of any. We can see another change here in these results. So there's a slight increase in people saying yes, they are aware, which is good. Sorry, a slight increase in people saying no as well. So about 15% saying no now. But a 16% increase in people saying yeah, they are now aware of policies which may disproportionately affect homeless users. And this could be policies around, for example, sleeping, for example, having to give your address when you sign up for a library card, and so on. So I was pleased to see that over half of the people surveyed felt that they were now aware of how the policies may affect homeless users. If we now turn to one of the key questions of the survey, that of whether the Metro Library does enough to help homeless users make use of its service. In 2022, I thought this was pretty startling. 72%, almost 3/4 of people, thought that we actually didn't do enough to help homeless users make use of our services. But if we look at the same question earlier this year, you can see a huge improvement in that. So instead of 72% of staff saying we're not doing enough, only 31% of staff saying we're not doing enough. So there's a 40% improvement in that. 38% of staff now think that we're doing enough to help homeless users get access to our services. About 31% are neutral. It's not perfect, but there's an improvement. Now let's look at one of the new questions. This asks whether respondents think that there have been improvements for homeless users in the Metro Library since the last time they completed the survey on this topic. So we'll disregard those who didn't complete the previous survey. Those are people that are new to the staff in the interim 2 years. We can see it's about 50-50, so about 50%, it's exactly 50-50. 50% of people agree that there have been improvements, and 46% of people are neutral. I'm glad to see that no one disagrees with it, but it shows that there's still work to be done to try and drive improvements for homeless people at the Metro Library. Next, we're going to have a quick look at the open-ended questions. So those naturally produced a wider range of responses, as you might imagine. And the questions on screen are what were asked. So what I did with my previous talk is I looked at the answers based on themes. So I looked at answers regarding funding, I looked at answers regarding policy, and so on. What I've decided to do for this one is look at answers regarding changes that have taken place. So a lot of the data I'm taking is from that last question. It's not all from that last question, but naturally quite a lot of it is. Again, if you want to see the full results, if you want to see what everyone said, I'm happy to share that with you. So looking specifically at answers regarding changes to the Metro Library. This first remark we see on the screen there, I think staff are generally more aware of information and support that can be offered to homeless users and have been offered training on the topic. Reflects what I think we've been seeing in the close-ended data, which is that there has been a broad improvement in the way that staff are being encouraged to look at homeless users and how they're responding to that. So it's good to see the staff are conscious of the benefits of the training that's been provided. The middle one there is a negative one, but I thought we'd keep it anyway because I think it's important to talk about. They said our change in opening hours saw a reduction of 6 hours, which was 10%, across 2 evenings, which is likely to have impacted homeless and vulnerable customers as it has reduced the opportunity to utilise a free space. This is a group whose voices are traditionally not heard. Unfortunately, the change of hours this time last year were done in spite of or because of the harm they would do to vulnerable individuals in the city. I think staff have done their best to try and mitigate it, but it's undeniable that our most vulnerable users, not just homeless users, but also disabled users, for example, children, were hit the hardest by that. And we've already talked about the fact that homeless users are much less likely to engage with complaints procedures than others are. And so I think that we end up with a situation where city councillors think they've done quite well, there's been very few complaints, but actually the people most affected are very unlikely to complain. The third respondent here is talking about our improved dwell areas. So they say we've provided better seating in dwell areas across the building, and we've increased the number of free events we provide too. What they're talking about is what's on the screen just now. So help can come from unexpected places. In the case of the Warm Spaces Fund for the Metro, it was the Scottish Government. The Metro was designated a warm space towards the end of 2022. For those of you not based in the UK, as energy bills rose towards the end of 22, public buildings were designated warm spaces. They were given free teas and coffees to give out so that people could be somewhere with heating, essentially. That came with funding. And what we decided to use that funding for, or a lot of it for, was to buy new furniture for the library. Not to replace old furniture, but to add furniture to the collection we already had, and make use of spaces which previously had essentially sat empty. So you can see here, this is our main foyer area. We added some coffee tables, some new couches. We made use of the landing areas of the stairs. We've got 5 floors, we had 4 landing areas, which we made use of on the left-hand side there. They're all like that. They've got a wee couch and couple of wee armchairs. We added some seating in our leisure and lifestyle area, our fiction area, and then we also tried to add some more group study spaces, some more comfortable chairs in some of the foyer areas as well. One of the great things about that was that it just made the building more accessible to everyone. It gave people a space to be without having to seem like they were doing something, because I think previously one of the faults of the Metro was that we had a lot of desk space, for example, but that does give the feeling that you should be studying or reading or something like that when you're there. So it was nice to have some soft furnishing where people could just be comfortable. Looking at some other responses we have, number one, I think work has been done to increase information for staff to help them help customers, such as helpline numbers. What that's referring to there are posters that were put up around the building with useful phone numbers, including those for homeless organisations, places to get washed and cleaned and so on. Additionally, on this note, we also added to the main desk a very detailed folder which lists all the organisations helping homeless people and refugees in Glasgow that I could find. Each page gives a wee bit of information about the organisation. We have a little key for what it offers. For example, we offer needle disposal, a place to get washed, a place to sleep, a place to get food, the various, as well as the opening times and how to find and contact it. So we keep this at the main information desk, and it allows members of staff to help homeless individuals who reach out for help, which increasingly happens quite a lot. This is very easy to replicate, and it's very easy to use as a template, so if you want to see ours and you adjust it as you like for yourself, you're very welcome to just let me know. And then again, echoing the previous comment, we have someone talking about the benefits of us having more places for homeless users to sit and use. Now, I'm coming to the end, and I want to leave you with a few useful contacts and suggestions for trainings in your own organisations. A lot of the organisations on the screen there, these are all Glasgow based, sorry, they're a lot in your area as well. They're usually very happy to provide resources and engage more closely with the library. In fact, they're kind of desperate to do it, and if you invite them, they'll usually be quite excited to take part. One thing I'd really recommend that worked really well for us was inviting staff and users of these services for walk-arounds and tour of the libraries, because we all know that our local communities often aren't aware of all the things that we're offering. You know, we offer so many great stuff, but I think we know we're not always great at telling people we're offering. And if you're looking for training for your staff, I'd like to suggest this gentleman you can see on the screen here. His name's Ryan Dowd. He runs a homeless centre in the US. I think it's in Philadelphia, I'm not sure. But what he also does is provide training for libraries and working with homeless individuals through his homeless library programme. So what I managed to do with him was arrange one live and a few pre-recorded training sessions with his organisation, which I then screened for staff. The sessions, they contain really practical, no-nonsense advice for working with homeless people in a really humane and kind way, while also keeping the order in the library, and they're absolutely brilliant. The staff feedback of all the training we did, that was the staff feedback. He got the best feedback. He's really friendly, he's really articulate, and he knows what he's talking about. He also has a wee newsletter, which comes out every week. It's really good. I'd recommend signing up for it. It's free, and he tells a wee anecdote. They always have kind of surprising subject lines, so they can kind of shock you. Like, I think what was the time I brought a Kalashnikov to work or something like that, but they're good. So I'd really recommend him. I'm conscious of time now, so I want to thank you all for coming along today. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I'd love to answer any questions you have. I'm just going to leave you with a quotation from one of our respondents, which I think is really apt and worth considering if you're wondering whether to work to make similar changes in your own organisation. This person said, most of the changes that I believe would help homeless users would largely help everyone who uses the library in general, but would perhaps be most appreciated by those vulnerable users. As with more disabled access, more awareness of racial, sexual and gender issues and so on, I think the changes that you make to help homeless users are almost always going to help everyone. I was just in the RNIB talk upstairs, I don't know if anyone else was, but they were talking about, for example, improved signage and stuff like that. That helps all of us. It doesn't just help people with vision impairments. And the changes that we made in the metro, for example, having more dwell areas and so on, that helps everyone. It doesn't just help homeless people. It's just that they are probably going to benefit from it the most. So if you're considering these changes, consider that they'll probably help all your patrons. And it's just kind of gravy that it's going to help those vulnerable people a little bit extra. On the screen there are my contact details. Feel free to get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think I've got that time for some, so if you want to ask me anything, I'll try to answer. Otherwise, you can catch me around today. Thank you very much. Say what I want to. Yeah, actually.
Noticed that the Glasgow libraries download all, because I cannot hear for very well, so if you're registered homeless stage, the Glasgow libraries now automatically you get like from what the house the rooms department to get the library tour?
No, we didn't go down that route, but we did have a policy change in between my first survey and the second, which was that we now no longer require you to have a home address to have a library card. So if you're homeless and you come to Glasgow Libraries, what they'll do, if you don't have a fixed address, they'll just put the library's address as your address. So that is a change in made, so it's now a lot easier for a homeless person to get a library card, because previously they were limited to getting what we called a temporary card, because they didn't have a fixed address, and that only allowed, I think it's 2 or 3 books rather than the full 12, for example. So now they get a full library card, but no, we don't automatically get access to that.
Well, expecting that somebody would say,
Yes.
there's still bargain shares, so somebody would actually split it and you pass to about use it during my age. So that's very much for climbing point.
No problem. Anyone else? Yeah, and cool.
It's I noticed that we done any surveying with any issues or just like racist deck off about the intersection of faith.
So I didn't for the initial one. The reason I did for the initial one was because I was doing the research as part of my degree, and because COVID was at the time, although it was late, it was kind of late 21 to into 22, COVID was still very much a big thing. Our ethical requirements for COVID safety basically precluded me speaking to anyone except for on Zoom. Even though at that point I was already in work with these people every day, I had to prove that my interviews and stuff were done with people remotely, which wasn't great. And then when I did my follow-up, I had planned to also do a public survey with it, so I then left the organisation. But I'm looking at doing some more stuff over the next couple of years, and yeah, my aim would be to do that. But if you're looking for that kind of perspective, this guy Muggleton, I think he used to work at Strathclyde, but I'm not sure where he works now. Anyway, his research is available usually for free online, so a lot of public access journals, and he did really extensive research talking to users of Glasgow's homeless services and about how they interacted with libraries. I think he did some research around Edinburgh as well, so that's where you can get that kind of information, but I didn't do that yet.
Thank you.
And the most we've got time for one more.
Oh, sure. Sean's with Lucas Hillman.
Well, if you see me around and you want to ask anything, feel free to do that. Otherwise, I'm happy just on the chat. But thank you very much for coming along and enjoy your lunch.
Okay, and so much for us all to think about and take away from this session. Now please join me again for a round of applause for Kavan. Thank you for coming today.